So, my name is Opreet Kang, and during the day, I spend my time working for the Immigrant Employment Council of BC, a provincial nonprofit that focuses on ensuring that employers have a workforce that's inclusive of new Canadians. And during the evenings, I work to ensure that Vancouver remains a progressive city through Vision Vancouver, alongside a few of the city councillors you heard from over the past few days. I'm so thrilled to be here for the final session of Progress Summit 2016. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you our final speakers for the summit as they join me here on stage. Each one will share with you a priority for the progressive agenda and the ways in which we can collectively shape the future in Canada. We spent the past few days hearing about issues facing Canadians across the country. There are no shortages of challenges to confront. These speakers will lay out key issues they are fighting for, but more importantly, offer solutions and alternatives to outline the kind of future so many of us work, organize, fight, and dream for. It is my pleasure now to introduce to you all of the speakers who will come up one at a time to the podium and share their stories and vision with you. Please have your interpreter devices on, as speakers will be communicating in English and French. Together, they will chart out the components of a truly progressive agenda for Canada. Our first speaker will be Eve-Lyne Couturier. She is a researcher with the IRIS, a Quebec-based think tank that researches socioeconomics. For 3 years, she has been an analyst before the Quebec Energy Commission with an umbrella group of environmental organizations. Now, she works on issues of inequality, the evolution of the Quebec pension system, and the impact of public policies on women. It'll be followed by Megan Leslie. Megan Leslie is a senior consultant on ocean governance for the WWF Canada. As a community legal worker in Halifax, she founded the Affordable Energy Coalition and developed a tenants' rights program that was named a national best practice for eviction prevention. She served as MP for Halifax from 2008 to 2015 and deputy leader of the NDP for 3 years. Then we'll have Sukanya Pillay. She is the Executive Director and General Counsel for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and Education Trust. She has over 20 years of critical legal experience in both the public and private sectors. Her work has focused on international human rights law, including the intersections of business, trade, and development, with a particular focus on redress and access to justice for vulnerable and affected populations. Then we'll have Jagmeet Singh. He is a member of Parliament, a provincial parliament, for the Ontario riding of Bromley-Gore-Malton and the deputy leader of the Ontario New Democrats. He is the first... I see we have some folks from Ontario. He is the first turban Sikh MPP in Ontario. Prior to entering politics, Jagmeet was a criminal defense lawyer and community volunteer working on human rights issues. And of course, we'll close off with Chief Ghislain Picard, who is the Chief of Assembly of Chiefs Quebec Labrador Innu from the community of Pessimet. He is Chief of the Assembly of First Nations Quebec Labrador, a political organization representing 43 chiefs of the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador. He has held that position since 1992. Over to Eve-Lyne.
Alors, bonjour.
Good afternoon. My name is Eve-Lyne Couturier, and I'm a researcher at IRIS. What is IRIS? It's a progressive research institute that studies public policy and their impact on the population, a little like the CCPA, but in Quebec. As part of my work, we often start up by looking at government decisions and try to see what underlies their fine words and big promises. And we want to see whether there is another way of developing public policy, and that is the direction I want to take today. If governments had the means that reflect their ambitions, and the tax system was more than just a way of collecting money, but also a way of reducing inequality. First of all, let's look at things in Canada and Quebec. An increasing share of GDP goes towards funding the government. We believe that the economy is growing quicker than our collective funding. In order to get the economy back on track, politicians constantly are proposing to lower taxes, particularly corporate taxes, and they present it as a magic formula for reinvesting in society, creating jobs, and finally having the means of our ambitions. Except that for years now, we've been saying that, and for years now it hasn't worked. Private companies prefer to save money and move offshore rather than investing here. And during that time, we see cuts to public services, services that are essential to ensure that everyone can have an equal opportunity in life. So we have less money and fewer services, and we wonder whether we may be paying too much for fewer services. And this breaks ties of solidarity with people who don't have the choice that they claim to give us. And they say, well, go see how things work in the private market. In Quebec, the government dreams of decreasing income taxes in order to increase them on consumption. We would have lower taxes on wages and more taxes on consumption. But you know who spends most in relation to its income? One clue, it's not Picard, Pillay, or the Irving family. But beyond the fact that we're giving less money to government with fewer services, well, why should we actually care about that? Because it's in the countries where the gap between the rich and the poor is lowest that people live the best. And I don't mean where the poor live better, I mean where everyone lives better. And many empirical studies point to reducing inequality as a strategy for economic growth. So does that mean that redistributing wealth has to go through the government? We would like the market to do its share, but unfortunately that's not happening. Left to its own, the free market causes an explosion of inequality. It's only through government action that we can avoid making things a lot worse. But right now, more inequality is not being prevented. It's just staying in check. And that's why we should not be so quick to rejoice when we are promised tax cuts. Often, they benefit the richest. So in terms of looking at how we collect money, we have to aim for reform that will decrease inequalities, not just collecting money differently or putting more money in people's pockets, but by having universal public services that are accessible and well-funded. So what can we do to achieve that? Well, we can start by not remaining silent. We have to say and repeat, I like paying taxes. I want to have the chance to secure a job that pays enough so that I can contribute to make society better for everyone. And the more of us say that, the more the levels of government will be forced to hear us. We also have to hold the government accountable, not only for ensuring that it has enough money to fulfill its mission, but also that it uses that money for innovative policies. We have to stop waiting for the question of tax havens to be resolved at the international level. I dream of a Canada and Quebec that leads the fight against the practices of multinational corporations and the rich, as opposed to one that waits for everyone to see things their way.
Bref,
basically, what can we do in the next year? Well, we can talk, share studies, articles, graphs on the economy, public policies, and talk about the tax system. All of this belongs to us. Let's not allow the experts to tell us it isn't true. And we should try and renew our solidarity that is when we can finally perhaps have a progressive tax system that will help us to reduce the gap that increasingly divides us.
Hello, my name is Megan Leslie, and I am a social democrat. And my priority for Progressive Agenda is to tackle climate change like a social democrat. You know, yesterday, my heart went out to Minister McKenna and Minister Phillips. They talked about how hard it is to balance the economy and environment, how if the economy is disrupted, then Canadians, they're not going to come along for the ride. They're not going to help us out when it comes to fighting greenhouse gas emissions. And as a former politician, I get it. I know how important it is to have community on board if you are looking to try and change something. But what if we disrupted the economy on purpose? What if we disrupted it like social democrats? What if, in our struggle against climate change, we transformed our economy into a green energy economy, where our struggle for environmental justice, in that struggle, we addressed social justice and economic justice at the same time. Social justice and economic justice are fundamental prerequisite for a low-carbon economy. So my priority is to build a new suite of social programs but for a low-carbon economy. What could that look like? Well, back when we had a federal program for energy efficiency, there was this organization in Winnipeg called Blade Runners, and they trained Aboriginal youth in energy efficiency retrofitting. So this helped Winnipeggers reduce their GHGs, but also tackled the issue of youth employment, of job skills development for Aboriginal people, and it put money back in the pockets of Winnipeggers who spent less money on energy, making life just a little bit more affordable. Iron and Earth. This is a grassroots group of laid-off oil sands workers, and they're working to help those workers transfer their skills to building solar panels. Those same workers in the oil sands, those electricians and pipe fitters and iron workers, their skills are being put to use in the green energy economy. Their economy was disrupted, and this was their reaction. It's a reaction that we need to support. It's a reaction that we need to expand. We need to expand it into new sectors right now before the carbon bubble bursts. In Nova Scotia, until recently, we had a community feed-in tariff. So this means that small renewables producers and communities can actually lead our renewables movement, not the big corporations. This is where a little rural community can go to their credit union, they can get a loan, they can build a wind turbine, they know what their rate of return is, they can pay back that loan, and with the surplus, they can keep their rink open. Reducing our reliance on coal in Nova Scotia while keeping rural communities alive, that's justice. Some of us attended the workshop today on Canada Post and the role of post offices in the transition to a low-carbon economy. How could we use the social infrastructure of post offices to achieve justice in our communities? Well, we know that government is about to invest in energy efficiency programs. I hope that there's something there for low-income people. But I know through my work with the Affordable Energy Coalition in Nova Scotia that it is incredibly difficult to reach low-income households to let them take advantage of those programs. The post office is the great equalizer. What if they could fill that role to ensure that the most marginalized people in Canada got access to energy efficiency and were part of that low-carbon transition? So I say, let's disrupt the economy. Let's tackle climate change, but let's do it like social democrats. Let's not throw up our hands and say it's too hard. In our local communities, we can do this. We can talk to each other about solutions for the environment, and for all of us, we can work together to disrupt the economy like social democrats. So in this coming year, that's my priority. My priority is to be in my community, working with others to ensure a just transition to a green energy economy where we can all prosper. We know how to do this. We have the skills, we have the technology. All we need is the willpower. I have the willpower. Do you have the willpower? Then I invite you to join me to tackle climate change like social democrats. Thank you.
My name is Sukanya Pillay. I lead the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, CCLA. We fight for anti-terror laws that not only protect our rights, but also keep us safe. We fight against laws that violate our rights and don't keep us safe. That's why we're in court right now fighting Bill C-51. Let me share 3 examples with you why this is important. First, years ago, a woman in Canada attempted suicide. Years later, the U.S. denied her entry. Why? Because of that suicide attempt. The U.S. got that information from Canada. At CCLA, we think this is private information not to be shared, and certainly not with a foreign government. Further, in the context of counterterrorism, wrong and mistaken information sharing can lead to devastating, tragic mistakes. Maher Arar and at least 3 other Arab Canadians were detained overseas and tortured because of mistaken information sharing in Canada and with foreign governments. This is devastating and tragic. This does not keep us safe. The Aurora Commission gave us a detailed roadmap to make sure we don't repeat these mistakes. Now, we know that information sharing is essential to fight terrorist activities, but it must be proper information sharing. There must be accountability, there must be limits, and legal safeguard. C-51 pays no attention to this and has no useful or legal safeguards. Instead, it increases the flow and scope of information inside Canada and with foreign governments and with private actors here and abroad, with no meaningful oversight or review. This will not keep us safer, but it will allow for more mistakes, mass surveillance, profiling, and big data analytics of everyone in Canada. Second example, CSIS was created to gather intelligence following wrongdoings committed at the time by the RCMP. The Macdonald Commission stressed the importance of distinctions between information gathering and law enforcement powers, but Bill C-51 is a game changer. Now, CSIS has powers to act at home and abroad to disrupt threats, but who's watching them? We're also concerned that now with Bill C-51, as written, CSIS can go to a court in secret with no adversarial process and get a warrant to pre-authorize violations of the Charter. This is unheard of. It's incompatible with the rule of law and constitutional supremacy. In our legal system, warrants are meant to ensure compliance with the Charter, that searches are reasonable. Third, like me, you've probably heard about the 6-year-old boy on the no-fly list and other such mistakes. C-51 allows the Minister of Public Safety to put people on a no-fly list on a mere suspicion that they will threaten transportation security or commit a terrorist offense abroad. Okay, but the problem is there are no safeguards to check why a person is being put on this list and whether the underlying evidence supports the listing. An unjust no-fly list does not keep us safe and violates our charter mobility rights. And as the mother of the 6-year-old boy knows, once your name is on that list, it's very difficult to get that name removed. There's no due process and no fundamental or natural justice under the scheme. In closing, human rights are not antithetical to national security. Rather, such rights and safeguards are prerequisites to keep us safe. The Supreme Court of Canada said that the danger in the war on terrorism lies not only in the actual damage the terrorist can do to us, but what we do to our own legal and political institutions. They also said it would be a Pyrrhic victory if we defeated terrorism at the cost of sacrificing our commitment to the values that lie at the heart of our constitutional order. To this, I would add, it is the rights protected in our Constitution that will ensure that we lawfully survey and share information, that we gather evidence, that we thwart plots, charge, prosecute, and convict the real terrorists, lawfully punish them, and leave the innocent people in Canada alone and keep them safe. Going forward, please join us at the CCLA, www.ccla.org. Help us to fight Bill C-51. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jagmeet, and I am a human rights champion. I strongly believe that our access to charter-protected rights should not be determined by the color of our skin. And that's why I've been championing the end to the pernicious practice of carding or discriminatory police practices in our province. And what is this practice? And I think it's important to talk about it a little bit. People are being stopped not because they're a suspect in a particular criminal investigation, not because there's any evidence that links them to a particular crime. People are being stopped because of the color of their skin. They're asked questions, and the answers they give to those questions are stored in police database for no reason whatsoever. And that's a practice that must end. And so let's talk a little bit about the facts. In Toronto, a black person is 4 times more likely to be stopped than a white person. In Peel region, black and brown people, racialized people, Aboriginals are stopped for discriminatory reasons. This is unacceptable in our province. It's something that we need to stand up against. In fact, in Toronto, between 2008 and 2013, over 2 million contact cards were filled out, and 1.2 million people were impacted by this. Of those people that were stopped, 25% of them were from the black community, even though they only make up 9% of the population. It's very clear that this is a racially motivated practice. But why does that matter? Why does it matter that our policing is racially motivated? Well, it sends a very powerful and very negative message. I myself have been stopped a number of times. When I was a young person growing up in Windsor, I was stopped when I was a law student in Toronto, even as a lawyer. And what happens when you're stopped by the police in your own community, going to work, coming back from a friend's house, going to hang out with someone? When you're stopped for no reason in your own community, it sends a message that you don't belong, that you're not welcome, that you're doing something wrong when you actually aren't. That is something that damages your sense of self-worth, it hurts your self-confidence, and it divides our community. It creates divisions that weaken our society. And so what can we do about this? This is one of the times where I can say very clearly that the success that this movement in ending carding or working towards the end of carding, it's strongly in the hands of people like you. It's because of activists that came out and supported the movements that politicians started to pay attention. It's because people showed up in numbers to rallies and protests that elected officials started looking at this issue and saying, hey, we need to do something about it. So this is what I ask you to do. It should come as no surprise that the Liberal government has come forward with some regulations that aren't really that effective. I'm sure you're all very, very surprised by that. So what we need you to do is this. We need you all to show up and support movements that oppose these type of regulations that don't really deal with the issue, that are only paying lip service and tokenism to the real issues. So we need you to show up to support movements like the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now in Toronto. I had a chance to attend the rally in front of the police station, and it's courageous women, black women, racialized women that are standing up to this very pernicious practice. So I'm so inspired by their courage, and I think we can learn something from this, that it's very easy to stand up for an issue that impacts you directly. But it's much harder to stand up for an issue that doesn't impact you, but it impacts your fellow humans. And that's what it means to be a true progressive, and that's what it means to be a true human rights champion. And I encourage you all to be human rights champions together. We can end this practice in this province and hopefully across the world. Thank you so much.
Je parle aussi français.
I also speak French, and I would like to begin by thanking the Algonquin Nation, which is allowing us to meet on its traditional territory. My name is Ghislain Picard. I'm an Innu from eastern Quebec, but I also have the huge privilege of coordinating the work of 10 nations across Canada, across the Quebec and Labrador. We are the first peoples of this country, but today we will have the final word.
Un ami, un ancien collègue.
A former friend and former national chief, Ovid Mercredi, was saying a few years ago to me that we have ideals like everyone should have. It's healthy. But often our ideals are confronted with reality, a reality that easily turns into the challenges we're facing as Indigenous peoples. And it's important to bring this out because that, too, represents reconciliation or a need for reconciliation. Reconciliation could mean that we are not in the same camp, that we may be enemies. But one thing is clear. We have a common history, yes, that is full of conflict, but which is also full of alliances. First with the English or with the French, but at the very least, it is a history that is rich. And in my opinion, that also represents an opportunity for us today, not to rewrite history, but at the very least to correct those stages of history and those things that are unfair and unjust. And today we have that opportunity. We have the opportunity to rewrite a chapter of history. And why not in a full book
Plusieurs observateurs.
A number of observers will say that Canada is progressive, that Canada is the country that recognizes in its constitution and has since '82 the rights of our peoples. Some will say that Canada is the country that back in 2010 endorsed the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples. So why are we still looking for the right way to put an end to the status quo? Why, if Canada is a rich country, are we the poorest? Why do we face situations like in Saskatchewan, which we see every single day across this country? We have an opportunity today, an opportunity to change the course of history. My priority, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, is to find the best possible way for us to create the right conditions to make Canada a country that is progressive, but also a just country.
Et je vous invite.
And I invite you, I invite all of us to engage in that passionate mission.
Thank you to all of our fantastic speakers for sharing their bold ideas for a progressive agenda. It is not only inspiring to hear from all of them, but critical that as a movement of progressive leaders, we worked together to shape our future. And I thank everyone here as you return to your communities to do your part and your work to shape your community and move forward the progressive agenda. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. My name is Rick Smith, and I'm very privileged to be the Executive Director of the Broadband Institute, and it falls to me to close our proceedings this afternoon. Before I give just a few remarks, can I do the most important thing I'm going to do up here on stage, which is to ask you to join me in thanking our incredible Broadband Institute staff and volunteers for the work that they've done over the last couple of days. Thank you very much. The supporters, the sponsors of this event are absolutely critical. Our staff are amazing, but really the 75 volunteers that work tirelessly over the last few days are really the heart and soul of this event. So thank you very much to them. I have to say that whenever I close these proceedings every year, I do so, it's a bit of a bittersweet task. I love this event. I find it incredibly invigorating. I never want it to end. On the other hand, I can't wait to put what I've learned here into action. And I think we should look at the Progress Summit as a giant charging station. And it's time to gather the energy that's been generated here and to gather it up and get a move on in our communities. Les idées ne manquaient.
The ideas were flowing over the last 3 days, and our challenge now is to put them into action. Social change is a curious thing, because to advance, you have to be skillful more than scientific.
There are some very strange myths out there regarding how social change is made. Social change is not conferred from on high by great men and women. Social change is not an inevitable law of the universe like gravity. Social change is a clay that ordinary people mold. And on any given day, its shape is up for grabs and its outline is uneven. I was born in 1968, and over the course of my life, I've seen great progress in Canada. And this was brought home to me the other day when my wife and I actually watched, we were watching The Breakfast Club. Did I mention I was born in 1968? My wife and I were watching The Breakfast Club with our kids, a movie, of course, that was wildly popular when we were in high school. And I have to confess, it was a bit of an uncomfortable experience, not only because the racy teen emotions were a bit more than I remembered, but also because the word fag was prominently and carelessly used as a slur throughout the movie in a way you would never see tolerated in a high school in 2016. It was unfortunately an accurate portrayal of hateful attitudes and behaviors that, though somewhat diminished, still linger today. Je suis heureux qu'au cours de ma vie, j'ai pu
So I'm very happy to have witnessed over the last few years the success of the LGBT movement. I was part of a campaign to produce, to increase green spaces, to protest against climate change. I've seen the diversity of Canada grow and, as a consequence, grow richer. I saw Canada become a more inclusive society in response to its diversity, and finally put an end to discriminatory policies towards the Indigenous and First Peoples of Canada. Now, it is a fascinating thing to witness the increasing inclusion of our society.
Christmas carols. And now my kids can easily wish you a happy Lunar New Year in Cantonese, and they celebrate Diwali in their classroom. We know as progressives that these successes are not theoretical things. They're not victories just to be chalked up on a board and forgotten. When we win, it matters. Our success can be measured in terms of the fullness of Canadians' lives, the health of our kids, the size of the green space that we bequeath to them. And if we're honest with ourselves, we also need to admit that there are areas where our efforts have yet to bear fruit, and these matter too. Here's one such area. In the decade I was born, voter turnout was nearly 80%, and it's been declining, with a couple of exceptions, ever since. So the connection between Canadians and our democracy is badly frayed. It needs immediate repair, and at the rate we're going, it will be 100 years until women achieve equal representation in the House of Commons, and we can do better. Here's another. When I was a kid, federal spending as a percentage of GDP was 1/3 greater than it is in this current liberal, so-called big spending budget. The federal government no longer generates the financial resources to provide the services Canadians need, which underpin the vibrant communities that we desire, and this sorry state of affairs cuts across all issues that we care about, and we can do better. You know I'm going to ask you to say we can do better with me. You know I'm working up to that. I'm just warning you right now. Here's another area. Since I was a kid, the top 1% of income earners have increased their share of the pie by over 30%. And the rate of childhood and family poverty has remained almost exactly the same. Some people are getting richer in our country, and it's not the majority of Canadians, and we can do better. And I'd like you to say it with me. We can do better. Let's do that again. I know it's almost 5:30. Thank you. As Ed said in his opening speech, it's clear that Canadians aren't satisfied with the status quo. It's clear that progressive policies are on the move right around the world. It's clear that on issue after issue, people are with us. And we know that change doesn't just come from fighting the old, but by building the new. So I want to ask you a few last questions. Are you ready to build an unstoppable national movement to bring about proportional representation? All right. All right, here's another test. Are you ready to fight inequality wherever, whenever it exists right across our country? Êtes-vous prêt à assurer que le Canada...
Are you ready to ensure that Canada, once and for all, contributes to the solution to climate change?
Excellent. Well, I'm ready too. In his Jagmeet Memorial Lecture a few years ago, the great Canadian Social Democrat Charles Taylor said that the moment that democracies are most alive is when they're recreating people power. And that was the power that we felt over the last 3 days. I want to suggest that we now carry it forward together. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your ideas. Thank you for your dedication to shaping a better future for Canada. Let's get to work. Merci d'être venu. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for coming.